We're going to do a 10-minute topic. I don't know if it's going to last 10 minutes. I've been falling short a little lately. On buying occupied properties. I'm bringing this up because we had a quick pick meeting, which is one of our um, short meetings that we have in between our monthly meetings. And it came up about occupied properties. And it was a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share. So, we love buying occupied properties. Now, let's discuss what that means. It really depends on your area. Now, if you're in New York, you know that evicting a tenant is not the simplest thing. We really have focused on Nassau and Suffolk and not the five boroughs. For one of the reasons was that we didn't want to deal with evictions there. Now, obviously, you could buy properties in the five boroughs and not buy occupied. But for us, we've always felt that buying occupied properties was helpful. And what that means is that very often the only reason we're able to buy a property from a seller is because the seller does not want to deal with conflict with the tenant. Now it sounds crazy, I know, but it's absolutely true. And I even had firsthand experience with this. I had an investment property that I bought in 2004, and I got way too close to the tenant. He started doing work for me in other areas, and it was a problem because when they stopped paying rent, um, you don't want to get into it with them. So in the end, I sold that property, uh, and I sold it for a very cheap price. And as I think about it, I really was a motivated seller because I don't want to deal with the conflict with the seller, with the tenant, and that happens all the time. So we bought a few wholesale properties back in June, and we just sold two of them. And we had a quick peek at one of them that we're going to sell in December. Um, and two of them were occupied. And the way we got the property is that I told the seller, we're going to take it with the tenant. You're not going to have to deal with it at all. And in both cases, and this has happened before, they got the tenant left before we closed. So it's a little weird, right? Because I think the whole reason they sold it to us at the price they sold it to us was because they didn't want to deal with the tenant. And in the end, the tenant left. So what happened, right? So a couple of things happened. First of all, they go to their attorney and they say we're selling the property. Standard language in every contract is it's going to be vacant. And their attorney says to them a lot of attorneys are idiots, and they'll say something like, "Well, it has to be vacant," and they're like, "Okay," and like the whole thinking of, "Wow, this guy, I'm only selling it to this guy because he's taken it with a tenant," doesn't even come up. So that happens. Also, sometimes they just assume, and it's weird because you're having a conversation with them about it. I've even given many sellers two prices. This is the price I'll take it occupied, and this is the price I'll take it vacant. It's always more if it's vacant because you don't want to deal with it. But we deal with evictions all the time. We just evicted somebody last week. Took a while. The guy really played us on the system. Got over us. Took a year, but he was paying us rent, so we made some rent. But it was a mess. We screwed up. We made mistakes. We should have got him out in 6 months. Took a year, but we got a decent amount of rental income to sort of offset our costs. But we buy occupied all the time, and I can't stress enough how many sellers, how many non-occupied properties the seller just does not want to deal with the tenant and start with it. Now, in the five boroughs of New York City, evictions uncontested can take a year and a half. Okay, if they really know how to play the system, it could take 2 years. In Nassau and Suffolk, uncontested, it's 3 months, 4 months, and if they know how to play the system, it could be longer. But that's a big difference for us, right? 3 months you can live with, right? And you always got to assume they're going to damage the property. The truth is, the one we just evicted didn't do damage, and most of the time they don't, but sometimes they do. So it's a big deal, right? So a couple issues even before that. So very often you can talk to a seller, and the seller's going to say, "I got this property, you can't get in, it's occupied." So we always say the same thing. We say, "Listen, we're never going to talk to the tenant about us buying the property. Just say we're there to do an inspection." Right? From the insurance company, whoever you want to say. We're in there for 3-4 minutes and that's it. So that works a lot. Doesn't work all the time, but it works a lot. You got to get inside. If the guy won't let you inside and get you pictures, you may have a situation where you may be able to buy the property and no other investor will. Now, also, I'm taking another step back. Many investors will not take an occupied property. Many. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a huge percentage. They don't want to deal with it. They don't understand it. They heard nightmare stories about it. They're from the five boroughs and they know it takes 2 years. Many. So you being able to say, "I'll take the property with tenants," puts you already, you may be the only guy they're talking to, right? They may get 40 postcards. They may get 50 phone calls. They may get 100 text messages. But if you say I'm going to take it occupied, you may be the only one that's saying that. So understand it puts you at a different level, and it's helped us buy a lot of properties for sure. So you have to know how to do the eviction, right? I would love to do the eviction personally. Um, for many years before I did my own evictions, and I think I can do them better than most attorneys. But if you buy a property in an LLC in Nassau, Suffolk, most places, they don't let you go pro se, which means they don't let you represent yourself. You need an attorney, which sucks. It's expensive. We have a good attorney for landlord and tenant issues if you want. But what's important is that you figure in, worst case scenario, how much it's going to cost you and holding costs during that time. And you got to figure there could be damage when the tenant leaves, because when people get evicted, they go. Evictions aren't that expensive unless they go to the final stage. So the way it works in Nassau, and everywhere in Nassau except the city of Long Beach and the city of Glen Cove all go through the same court. The way it works in Nassau is that it takes a couple of months. You have to go to the sheriff. Depends how backed up the sheriff is. The sheriff goes 3 days before and gives a 72-hour notice and says you're leaving. Most people leave at that point, right? They know it's done, or they file an order to show cause, delay a little bit, but they get a notice and they have to go. That's great, right? If they vacate, and then you don't have to do the eviction, because the actual eviction is expensive. You have to pay for a moving company to come. And we have a great moving company if you need, much cheaper than the others, but it's still thousands of dollars to come in and get all their stuff and keep it in storage for 30 days. 2 trucks we had on the last eviction, and it's thousands of dollars. That's where it gets expensive. Short of that, legal fees, all that stuff shouldn't be terrible, a couple grand total. But the eviction can be expensive. So we're a big believer in buying occupied properties. Big, right? We just closed on another deal where the same situation. We told the guy we'd take it with the tenant. The tenant left the day we closed. It happens a lot. It's been happening more and more often. I can't explain it. It's great. But what I want to tell you is that if you were under the impression to shy away from it, it's a mistake. I really believe it puts you in an elite area where you may not have a lot of competition. You have to understand the costs. You got to figure in the costs when you make your offer, right? You can't think this is going to be something. And we always go to the tenants first and offer them money. Always, right? And it's happened. People have taken our offers. Some haven't even responded and have gotten evicted shortly after, and could have got left with a big check and left with, sheriff kicking them out. So it's different in every situation, right? Every area is different, right? If you're watching this and you're not in New York, Texas is amazing. 2 months you don't pay your rent, sheriff comes with a gun, kicks them out. Other places have quicker evictions than New York. New York is slower, but Nassau and Suffolk aren't that bad. So I think if you're not buying occupied properties because someone told you don't ever do that, you got to rethink it. I think it's definitely been a reason why we bought tons of properties. And I'll give sellers multiple numbers. This is what I'll take if the tenants are out, and this is what I'll take if the tenants are in. And it all depends on their motivation, because you never know what kind of relationship they have with the tenant. Sometimes, I'm not saying that they're cousins. I'm saying that if you have a tenant that's been there for 18 years, that you feel is a great tenant that has told you, hey, I fixed this and I didn't charge you. There's years of amity built up, and you don't want animosity. You don't want a conflict. And it seems crazy to say. Sometimes it's just a matter of they don't want to have the discussion of saying you have to leave. But I firmly believe that buying occupied properties is a good thing if you're not in the 5 boroughs. But even in the 5 boroughs, people buy occupied and they just budget a lot of money to get people out. So it's something you have to figure. If anybody needs help with evictions, with an attorney, with the process, how it works, how much it could cost, feel free to call me, and I'll be happy to tell you. I know the process pretty well. It just got a little more complicated when you buy occupied properties. You have to give longer notice. The laws just changed, and that is complicated. But in general, it's not a bad thing, and I'm a big fan of buying occupied properties.